All right, here we are again. I got my good friend Coach Parker, now residing in New York. Well, hey, what the hell? You went from Texas to New York. Nobody does that.
Yeah, it feels like going from having a good amount of money to what am I doing here?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to be the bearer of bad tidings, but I just think shit's about to get real in New York. You know.
Well, yeah, we'll see. But my wife, being a chiropractor, she took a job here,
Okay.
and she's always wanted to live in New York. So I was like, well, let's go. And I'm
Yeah.
like, we can stick it out as long as you want, and we can go wherever you want. I don't care.
All right. That's a good view. I went from
Yeah,
California to Tennessee,
yeah,
and I can tell you, I don't know anybody in Tennessee that's looking to move to California. I mean,
yeah,
I'm going to keep politics aside, but I'm just saying that now, personally, I miss living in California. I really do.
yeah.
The weather obviously is amazing all the time, and again, short of the politics. Now, where I lived, there was no issue. I mean, it was safe. Actually recorded as being the most temperate climate in the country in Camarillo. And
Yeah.
I mean, there was no, I mean, I had a great house, lived in a cul-de-sac. I didn't worry about traffic because my nature is I work from home. I didn't live in L.A. Never needed to go to L.A. Never wanted to go to L.A. You know, I mean, never. I just don't. And so it was no issue. It just made financial sense to move. I mean, the market was right. I could sell my house for way too much money and come here and trying to glam on to a good lifestyle, no taxes, and you know, it all didn't work
Well,
out like I hoped, but
yeah. Yeah, well, we just decided to double our monthly living space and price and downsize by like a third to a fourth and take on city and state tax. So, whatever.
yeah, yeah, we don't have a. I don't think we have a state tax.
Mm-mm.
No,
No,
and
neither did
so
Texas.
yeah. Well, anyway, so you were kind enough to come on, and I know you probably didn't get enough time to really go through and read Flow. Um, and you said you have some questions, which is great because I like to talk about it. Before we go there, I have to take you here, okay? Because I had
Let's go.
mentioned I had mentioned to you that I'm in the midst of writing another book,
Yeah.
and I'm telling you, it's weird because I will never tell someone I'm an author. I just don't feel like I got the street cred to say that, right? Even though this will be my fifth book, I just don't feel
Yeah,
like.
I'd say you're.
Nah, I'm not wearing that because first of all, I'm not a journalist, right? I'm writing about life experience. I'm writing about things that I've learned in the field that I'm in. And because I'm so freaking old, I've had a lot of experience. I mean, I've just been at this for a really long time. And I've done all kinds of things, right? So it just came to me that I needed to share some of this information. And so the first book I wrote was hard and I messed it up so badly. I mean, you just, it was terrible. But people liked it. People liked the information. And so I offered up a second edition of the same book because I learned from developing the first book what I was screwing up, and I fixed it in the second book. And then the next book, which was Training the Dark Side, um,
Yeah.
what triggered that was Hunter. This
Yeah.
this is this is back in the day when Hunter and I were working together pretty closely, and it just occurred to me with the nature of the things he was doing, it had little to do with aerobic functionality. It was more anaerobic activity, and so I came up with the concept of training the dark side. So I looked at over threshold as being the dark side. the place that
Yeah.
everybody is mysteriously afraid to go to, and they're sparingly going to be there, and it's like going to a haunted house. It's Halloween today, right? And so I wrote that book, and that worked me. I mean, it took me 4 years to write that book. 4 years, honest to
Did
God,
it
4 years.
really?
Yeah, it took me 4 years because um, I was careful that I did not want to just regurgitate the things that I did in the first book. I think what happened is I fell prey to follow the Joneses, right? Everybody
Yeah.
in the endurance community speaks from the same song sheet, about how they organize training over time and blah 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 and periodize this and that. And I was like doing the same thing. And I said, this doesn't feel right to me. This does not feel like where I am time and space mentally. And from what I've learned, I said, I got to stop looking at what other people are doing and just trust myself and do what I'm doing. And that it took me a long time to finally get to that. You had to see it unfold. It's like in our dining room table, you know those like these boards where you have like a big sheet of paper, like a 2.5 by 3.5 foot pad of paper, so you can draw on it while you're dictating to people, whatever. And
Oh,
and
like Pictionary.
yeah, yeah. So I had this laid out on my dining room table with a bunch of magic markers, different colors, and I'm trying to map this out, right? I mean, it's like the war room. I'm trying to map this out. And that table held that information in piles of shit left and right while I was trying to get through my minutia to get this thing out. And it took 4 years to arrive at this place. And so I got to share this with you because it's leading somewhere. Okay. So I'm doing a lot of clinics at the time, and I was traveling a lot. I mean, I went to 14 different states to do clinics, and some of them multiple times. Texas, I was in Texas 5 times. I think I was in Vermont 3 times. I was in New Jersey a couple, 3 times. But 14 different states, just boom, 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 doing clinics. Here I meet with like 25 people that I've never met, do a gait evaluation on them, do a training with them, do a VO2 test on them, and the culmination of information goes over the course of a weekend, and I'm out, right? And I finally got to a place where I didn't want to do it anymore. I said, you know what? I am done traveling. Never mind carrying my kit, which is, I don't know, $18,000 worth of stuff that I got to trust when I hand it off to baggage claim, right?
Yeah.
I was just scared that something's going to go wrong. I mean, so I just decided I didn't want to do it anymore. So people were coming to me, all right? So all the clinics that were happening at that point in time were occurring based out of my home in California. All right, so where I'm going with this is we're out back by my pool. I got about 20 people in chairs, and I've got my dry erase board out, and I start drawing this infinity symbol, right? I'm not saying anything. I'm just drawing this big infinity symbol, and I'm tracing over it and over it and over it. And they're all looking at me and looking at each other going, the fucking guy lost his shit. He finally lost it. And then so this is me just trial and error. I'm going to find out how people receive this information, right? So I'm
Yeah.
trying to explain to them that I don't want this continuum that starts here and ends here. All training has a beginning and an end, right? I wanted something to be potentially continuous. I didn't want to draw a circle because that also ends, in a conclusion. But an infinity symbol represents infinity. It just goes on and on and on. So you can expand
Yeah.
and contract it any way you like, right? And I thought, now this model makes sense to me. And so I started laying it out and explaining to him where we're going to plug in various elements of training, whether it be aerobic, whether it be skill based, whether it be up a hill, down a hill. And I'm showing how this is going to lay out. And it's going to lay out relative to a person's individual psyche, what they feel they should be doing at that point in time, right? And that turned out to be me chasing flow. And so I started to introduce flow then, right? And then I came back with that other book, which is kind of, time and space. I'm a mercenary. High rocks got big. So I started going after high rocks. So running and hybrid fitness, I called it. And the same thing applied. I started to show how we're going to try to do this. And and I know that people looking at this goes, what is he talking about? Because that has nothing to do with the things that they hear, right? The common thread in conversation and circumstance, I'm like way outside the box, right? And there's some outliers that really dug it. And they're like, oh yeah, this is great, and started training that way, and they started to see some amazing results. But it took a particular type of person to be opened enough to do this, right? So, got that out there. And then I thought, I got to go deeper in this. So, I wrote Flow just for someone that might want to see what I'm talking about. This is the book Flow.
Yeah.
And, it was funny because when I started writing this, I was 75 pages deep and I said, I'm done. And, again, Hunter was in my head. He told me, he goes, if you have to write beyond 100 pages, you don't really know what you're talking about. But I just felt like this barrier existed that I needed to at least get to 100 pages. And so, I mean, I literally, I started going after it going, man, what else am I going to talk about? Because I basically covered it, right? And so, towards the end of the book, you'll start noticing there's some things that I don't want to call it puffery, but, who it's for and it's for you too, and, this kind of thing. But the meat and potatoes
Yeah.
was the concept of flow.
I think a lot of people, when they look at different training plans and they think, oh well, that's so and so, I'm not there yet, and I'm like, it doesn't mean we can't apply this to you, and then we just digress, and then over time you progress up towards this. It doesn't mean that I can't take this foundation of what this person is doing and transfer it to this person. And that's what I like about what I'm reading in Flow right now is people get scared of, like you said, going above the threshold. It's hard, it hurts, it sucks, but it's something that you've got to do. Um, and that's what I like. As soon as you started writing the infinity symbol, I was like, well, I like that because at all points you need to hit everything continuous. And this is like when it's that time of the year where I start getting athletes are like, oh, I'm going to take a little bit of time off. I'll reach back out in January, and I'm like, it's the beginning of November. What are you going to do for 2 months?
Well,
And well, I just thought I'd take a break, and I'm like, okay, well, this is why you're not PRing next year. This is why every year you're struggling to get to that PR, because we can take some downtime and then go back to base, but that way we're building on a foundation that's higher than it was last year. And this is how you stay up here. This is how you get better. And I've had a couple people, over the year, well, more than a couple, but you get those people that you finally get through to them. And then the next year they're like, oh man, I'm getting faster. Oh man, I'm getting better. I can race more often. And, they come back after 2 or 3 months after not doing anything, and they're like, man, the volume is just so hard. And I was like, that's because getting your volume up there, that's the hard part. Once you're there, it's easy to maintain.
so when you get to the new book, and what's
All right.
cool? I've been telling people this, and I believe this to be true. And I don't know whether people take it with a grain of salt or what. I've been telling people, if you really want to learn something, write a book.
Oh, I
Because
can imagine.
in order to write a book, you have to research. And the fear of looking foolish will cause you to make sure that what you're saying is correct or valid, right?
Yeah.
And so every time I do this, I get an education. And I'm telling you right now, before you were on with me and after we get off, I'm back into this book. I've been dedicating, I've been dedicating on average 6 hours a day to research and refining these chapters. I'm about 250 pages deep right now of clean information. I'm just talking about this. This is just data. This is not images and crap like that. This is just pure 8.5 by 11 copy. And every chapter that I write, I get to a place with it, like I get excited. I'm actually getting excited because I've learned something that I didn't know yesterday, right? And it's information that people need to learn. And so when you start talking about flow, and this has been an education for me as well. Um, what I started to learn is the state of flow has a neural physiological and a chemical response when you achieve that state. I mean, your body starts creating this chemistry that puts you in this place where your central nervous system is relieved. You know, because your central nervous system doesn't care about your speed or performance, it cares about whether you're going to die or not. And when you relieve that stress point from your CNS, you start opening up Pandora's box. You start getting into this place that you've never been able to go before. Because performance is a struggle for most people. They're fighting to get to a place. And the fact that they're fighting is indication that they're already incorrect in their field, in their process. Now, so I stop talking about threshold. I start talking about levels of resistance. So the level of resistance that you might normally face might shift into a higher plane. So let's just put it into context. Let's just say pace. When you start to get to 6 minute mile pace, for example, you start finding resistance, it's unsustainable. And then you start to struggle. Your respiration goes up, your tension goes up, anxiety goes up. Collectively, all these things start working against you until you finally stop. And this is your
Yeah.
central nervous system throwing these buffers in to try to keep you from the thing that seems to be untenable. It's telling you, this isn't working for us, let's get out, right? But the reset would be to identify that there's some flaws in the process that need to be corrected. As you suggested earlier, did you get your running mechanics on point, and what things are failing you right now that you could be correcting on the fly to get past that hurdle? What are you doing that you identify is starting to fail you and it triggers that are causing you to back off? Maybe your respiration's off. Maybe you start to identify because your respiration is off, you start to throw tension up into your traps, you start to lock up. And then you start overstriding and start making all the mistakes that you were trying to avoid to begin with. But rather than just
Yeah.
identifying, oh, there's my threshold, I got to back up, it's not about that. It's just a point in resistance that you have to learn to contend with. I don't know anybody in our space that talks about this. And so here I am in this fishbowl of information. And the more I glean from it, the more I learn. And I'm going through these different paths and finding the chemistry and the history that goes into it. And as you noticed in that book, I started out with the woman that picks the car up off of her son, right?
Yeah.
So if that doesn't get you, to think, right? How in the hell does that happen, right? And you know what's really funny about this is I've never met anybody, and I've asked a shit ton of people. I've never met anybody that has not heard that story. You know,
You know what? They know at least something about it. They're like, you know what? I think I remember that. Like, it always cues to where they're like, I think I remember something like that. And then as soon as you bring it up, everybody remembers.
well, so usually it's about the baby. So it's like the woman that got the car off of her, because that sells, right? If you tell people there's a baby
Oh
under the
yeah.
car, if you got your dumb son under the car and the jack kicked out, you're not quite as concerned. But that's the reality of it is it was a woman.
Well,
I traced her down. I found her.
I mean, I have a similar story with my son. I didn't pick a car up off of him, but you know, when you have like a 30-pound child, I mean, he was much younger then, but depending on how you're grabbing them, if a 30-pound dumbbell was falling and you tried to grab it like hand over, kind of like, off of a ledge, you're hung out and that dumbbell's falling and you try to grab it, you're not going to, it becomes a lot heavier than you expect.
of course.
And my son for some reason, my spidey sense went off, and I just turned, and he's going up over the ledge in the house, off like the kitchen bar. And
Oh,
I just leap across and grab him by his calf, his lower leg, and just hold him like straight arm out and somehow just pick him up like he was paper. And I was like, holy crap, you know what? In any other moment, if that was like, if I was in the gym, there's no way I could repeat that with
yeah.
that much ease.
They refer to that as hysterical strength, where you get
Well, I
this
definitely was put into hysteria at that
you get
moment
this
because I
trigger,
never moved so fast and was so accurate in grabbing him and just stopped him. And
right?
I just picked him back up, and he's looking at me like, "What happened?" And I'm
Yeah,
like, "Oh,
you
jeez,
you get this trigger, and it taps
yeah,
into something that you normally are not able to get into. And so
no,
this is kind of what was driving me. I'm like, A, how does that happen? And so I started looking into it. I started looking into how do you get this hysterical strength, and and we started looking at different athletes that are triggering greater capacity in their brain capacity than normal people. Like professional soccer players, they tap into a great amount of performance that most people don't get access to. So, and you see this all
yeah,
the time. These athletes, like, wow, what did he, you know, running a 2 hour marathon, for example, things like this. You just don't get into this without everything coming together perfectly. And so,
yeah,
what flow to me is starting to identify that you have the capacity if you start to align yourself. Everybody's had this moment with what they call it being in the zone. I start tracking down all these different athletes and the little anecdotes they offered up about that moment in time where everything just gelled and everything became perfect, and they were able to perform without feeling any effort whatsoever. I was watching. Did you watch F1, the movie?
yeah.
There was a point in time where Brad Pitt was in the car and he talked about this moment in time where everything just got quiet and everything that he was doing just felt effortless. And I can't help but hear it when I hear it, right? Where these guys are referring to this moment. Yeah, they're
Yeah,
having this moment.
I know that feeling. Um, and Ken Miles, famous race car driver, drove the original Ford GT for the traditional story of, sorry, classic story of Ford versus Ferrari.
Yeah,
And it was the perfect lap. And I remember years ago, a friend of mine, he did some kart racing and raced in the Miata Playboy Cup series, the MX5 series. So I was out on the track one day, and we were doing the F1 karts, and we were in a race, and the best race I ever had and the laps that I ever had, I realized that every single lap had gone by. I didn't feel the heat of the suit and the sun. And I was just in this flow where my laps just kept getting faster and faster. I wasn't white knuckling anything. It was almost like I felt like I was in a recliner. And I had a triathlon that I did a couple of years ago, and I didn't taper for it. I was like, it's just a sprint. I'm just going out there for fun. And I showed up pretty sore from the week of training. Like the day before, I had like a 2 hour bike with thresholds and a brick run. And I was like, whatever. And I showed up to the sprint race, and everything just felt like it was an easy workout. And I won the overall race, but everything just was in that state where I was on the bike and I was flying. I just felt relaxed. It was like I found myself daydreaming on the bike, like just kind of zoned in, but just got onto the run, and I was like, oh, we'll see how it goes. And I just held stride all the way through the finish line. I got done, and I was like, okay.
yeah.
And I
Well,
couldn't. What happened? I can't fully explain it, but it's like what you talk about in your book, where it just seems like everything is aligning. Everything, all the the cogs are greased. There's fuel in the tank. Everything's firing properly. Your mind is in the right set. and it was one of the fastest sprints I had done, but yet one of the easiest that I had done.
Yeah. Now, so the thing about that is that you hear these little stories, and I think everybody's had that moment in time where the experience was like yours. I know I have, where everything just kind of gelled and everything worked, and you were in the zone, so to speak. And so then the question is, how do you recreate that circumstance, right? And
Yeah,
this is the thing that I wanted to dig into is like, how do you teach somebody to actually promote that state? You can't really just give somebody a line by line item. Here's how you get there. You may get there, you
yeah,
may not. You may get there and lose it. You may find it again. And I tell people this with running mechanics. It's like you're going to struggle with this until eventually you start to find where things just start to work, and then cost of work goes down and things like this. But that's more of a mechanical aptitude. But mechanical aptitude plays into it. But the psyche plays into it. Your breath, I never, and I'm going to be honest with you, I never gave much energy to breath work. And now that I've been doing this research and I'm seeing, like, Richard, where were you, man? This is critical information. So this
yeah,
is a big piece, right? When your respiration goes off, everything else goes sideways, right? And
yeah.
not
It
only that,
almost induces like a panic attack, and people don't realize it.
well, but
If
so
your
the
breath
panic
rate is
attack,
low and you're like, I can't breathe, I'm starting
yeah,
to feel heavy, you get tense. And then it's almost like people are experiencing these mini anxiety attacks while they're training or racing. And sorry to interrupt you, but
yeah,
one of the things I try to get some of my triathletes to do when they're out on easy rides or easy runs, I'm like, I want you to just don't follow the pace that I've set in the session. I want you to just focus on your breathing. I want your breathing to feel relaxed. I want you to go at whatever pace today your body tells you, as long as you feel relaxed in your breathing. Do your best to just nose breathe. Find a good way to, almost like you're doing yoga during the session.
right.
And that starts to take over in all their other sessions. Because I've had some athletes message me post workout and they're like, man, that was a hard session, but I started going back to trying to just relax and control my breathing while I was pushing. And I was able to get through the next couple of rounds.
Well, so where I've gone with this, and this is something I've been doing for I don't know, it's been a couple years now. When someone comes to see me for a VO2 test, uh, assuming that they're also doing like a gait analysis, so they're going to be with me for a bit. Once we have the VO2 done, I take them out and run them, and I track them on my bike, and I'm collecting the metrics. So I've got my app open where I'm seeing their heart rate, I'm looking at their pace, and then I'm quizzing them along the way relative to perceived exertion. And I narrow it down to a 1 to 10 scale. And
Yeah.
I prep them beforehand, letting them know that when we go, that a bunch of things are going to happen. One, I'm going to be guiding you through your gait patterns to make sure you don't blow it. I have I have a speaker in my water bottle cage, so the audible metronome's going off, and my neighbors are listening, tick 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 tick, while the guy's going around the block, right? And what I do is I'll say, "Where are you now?" I'm a 5, okay, and then I'm looking at heart rate and I'm looking at pace. And then I'm controlling the effort. So when I feel like things are going in the right direction and I want to tag them a little bit, I start punching on them. So I want to find out, A, what is sustainable and what is the outcome cost wise relative to what the data told me in the lab. So I might find that his threshold might have been, let's say hypothetically 160 beats per minute, where in fact at 160 beats per minute he's singing in the rain. He's just like, you know. And if I was to say, okay, look, you need to train at about 150 to really build the blah 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 blah, I'd be misguiding the guy. He had the potential to
Yeah.
be, he could be spending a little bit more and getting a little bit more from the effort. Because really, at the end of the day, what's really most important is sustainability. I don't care what your heart rate is. I care, can you do it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if your goal, let's look at high rocks. If your goal is to repeat 8 1 kilometer events, what is going to be sustainable for that effort? And then we can look at the
Yeah.
cost. I did this a while back. I don't know if I talked to you about this, but I did a quiz on social media. What's your age? What's your gender? What is your average heart rate at the conclusion of the event? And then I started doing the
Yeah.
math relative to their age, right? Just to see what the predictive measure might have shown them as being a threshold. Everybody was on average about 25 beats over their threshold. Everybody,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah. I remember seeing the results. I was like, Jesus, that's high. They're like at near max.
right. But what's really important to take from this is it was sustainable, right?
Yeah.
So what am I going to do? Is I'm going to tell the guy to slow down so he can build his threshold? Why? He's and this to be true too. Hunter races at 175 beats per minute. His threshold
Yeah.
is nowhere near that. I've tested him 6 times. There's never been a day
Yeah.
in his life where he had the capacity to be quasi aerobic at anywhere near those heart rates. He's easily, like those folks, about 20, 25 beats over threshold.
Yeah.
But
I was literally having this conversation with somebody the other day about high rocks. We were having a group meeting because we're going to start coaching somebody who I can't say anything, but
that's right.
um, I was like, dude, high rocks and just like the stuff that you've been doing, every real race is a fight against fatigue.
Absolutely.
It's the simplest way to put it. I was like, and you just have to learn in training where that is and then push your ability against it. So it's like, oh, you can sustain this for 10 minutes. Cool. Well, let's just keep building and then you'll be able to do it for 20 minutes and then 30 minutes and then 40 minutes. And I'm
Well,
like, I get a lot of high rocks people, and we start getting close to race day, and all of a sudden, we're 8 weeks out, 10 weeks out, and they're like, Jesus, dude, these sessions are just 5, 6 days a week. There's not really anything easy. And I was like, well, what are you prepping for?
yeah.
I'm like, well, we've done the base volume. We did that months ago.
And by the way, that's
Now
gone.
we're dialing.
That's
We're,
gone.
we're, we're now dialing everything in for race day. You think this is hard? It's because you're doing it over 6 days. Race day, you're trying to squeeze this into what, 60 minutes, 75 minutes? I'm like, race day is going to be hard, but in the grand volume of it, it's a lot easier than training.
Right. Well, yeah, it should be.
And
It should be. Yeah.
yeah, it's just they think that as they're approaching race day, they're going to start getting, oh, it's a hard day, it's an easy day. It's a hard day, it's an easy day. It's like, no, we're trying to put it all together. It's a lot of work, and you're just not eating
Right.
enough and resting enough.
Well, there's a ton of things that kind of play into all of this, but it's just I'm looking at, aside from how hard you push or how much you recover, what else is there you need to be considering? And the psyche, this neurology, the neural
Yeah.
physicality of this thing, because your brain is dictating function or regressing from function. It's always trying to keep you from killing yourself. And so when you start
Yeah.
presenting a threat, it fires. It starts to shut you down. And you might, oh, a
Yeah.
panic attack. Well, no, it's not. It's actually a safeguard. Your brain is saying, no, dude, we're not going to do this. And so you start to spiral out of control. I have a girl I work with. She's a high school athlete. She runs the 800-mile. Good athlete. And good news, we
Hey.
just got her a scholarship. But
Oh, congratulations.
I
That's huge.
track her. I'll track her on my bike, and I start pressing her, and I start to see the triggers. All of a sudden, she's starting to hunch up a little bit. Her arm swing starts to change. She starts reaching a little bit. Respiration starts going off, and I'm like, kick back a little bit. Here's what you're doing. Here's what you need to think about. Try to lose that. Try to get your breath patterns in order. Try to release some of that tension. That's going to help alleviate the anxiety you're feeling. And then when you start to feel things like the corrective measure you just induced, you go after it again. And then when you find that new trigger, you found out, okay, this worked for me this last time. Maybe I just need to do that again. And then you start finding that you start leveling up. You start getting further and further into it because you're not getting the resistance. We talk about negotiation with your central nervous system. That's what you're doing. Your central governor and your
Yeah.
central nervous system are trying to put resistance towards what is looking like failure. And you start to negotiate with, well, if I do this and this, will you let me do it now? And it starts going, well, yeah, okay, let's go. You've done this, you didn't die, let's move on. But that type of negotiation is well
Nervous
beyond.
system, it's learning.
Yeah, it's just, to me, that's so fascinating that when you get to a place where you get rid of um, the stress associated with doing how much recovery has to be there because all the things you did, and you're like, you're no longer training, you're just finding a way to get past struggle. And the struggle you represented was fatigue. So fatigue is an
Yeah.
outcome, right? So that's what gets me up in the morning. When I start thinking in terms of this, it's so next level to me that and so, let's back up a little bit. I go, me, I'm like a fly in the wall. I'm not going to go banging my chest about how fast I was or how fast I could be or whatever. I'm 72 years old, dude. I'm not, that's not my world. But I've got eyes, right? And I've got this. And I go to an event and I'm watching athletes. It's not because he's my friend. It's not because he's so fast. I just want to see the way he's moving or she's moving.
Yeah.
And so I'm not there to be critical. I'm there to learn, right? And I'll tell you what I've learned. And this is going to probably piss some people off. And I don't mean to do that, right? I'm just a guy, in my world, this is what I do.
Yeah.
I would say easily 80%, 75%, let me be a little bit more conservative, of the elite fields do not know how to run. Now,
I mean,
I'm not looking,
I'm
hold
not
on.
saying that my form is perfect, but it's kind of like how I'm trying to remember what department it is. I think it's the Federal Reserve. They have agents that know how to look at $100 bill. They don't teach them every way that a counterfeit is made. They're taught to know exactly what that bill currency is supposed to look like. And when that's not there, they're like, that's incorrect. And when I'll see it, I'm like, okay, they could probably fix something a little in their run form and just get a little bit more efficiency. Maybe they're not going faster, but they're going to conserve more energy.
Right. Well, so
There, there's a
let me patch up what I said just a little bit before we get lost. I didn't
okay.
say they
Sorry.
weren't fast.
You know
I
what I'm
didn't.
saying?
Yeah, I'm saying they could be faster. Is what I'm saying. And I'm so again going back to this concept of flow is that when all these triggers start to go off, you start to shit the bed. And
Yeah.
these guys are not relying on the confidence that the way they're going to approach this work is going to be as it should be. They start to shit the bed. And I'm assuming that's the case because all I know, just from a standpoint of physics, what I see exhibited when they're doing what they're doing could be way better. And like I'm not like trying to search for business here. I mean, I'm not. I'm just saying
It's an
my
observation of your field. It's what you do, right? It's just like when back to F1, they have certain engineers, mechanics that come in to make sure that the car is running at its best. And if it's anything less, you're off the podium.
right. Well, you're familiar with F1. I've been working with Joseph Newgarden for the past uh, this whole past season. He's been in
Sick.
he's been in my lab actually about 3 days after every race he did last year, right? Or
That's awesome.
or we go to a track together. He came to me and he said, "Look, I think I'm strong enough to hang with everybody." and he's gone up to spend some time with Hunter, and he's comparing. He's paying attention. He's comparing his ability to one of the best in the world. He goes, I think I can do what he's doing. Where I'm dropping the ball is I just don't run very well. He goes, I'm hiring you to help me correct my running mechanics. So we've been on this with a vengeance, like all season, and he's gotten so much better, so much better. And it's tough because in a heavy race season like he was in, and having a terrible season by the way, it was
Yeah.
hard. But he showed up like a soldier, man, and we would knock it out. I mean, we were doing intervals on the treadmill. My treadmill's a high speed treadmill. There's no barrier on.
Yeah, that thing
It's,
is sick.
it's 28 miles an hour. With a 40% grade. Right, so I can take you to the mat. I don't care who you are. And so we're doing intervals at 12 and a half miles an hour, 1 and 2 minute intervals with 30 seconds rest in between, and just popping them off and all I'm doing is sitting there making sure that every time his foot touches the deck, it's where it's supposed to be. And then I will video it, and or I will place it live so he can look at it from where he gets a side view of what he's doing from the front, and he knows what he's trying to do. So we're starting to alter his perception of effort. He can start to see when I do it wrong, it feels like this, and that's where my foot ends up. And when I do it right, this is what it feels like, and this is where my foot ends up. And so, as simple as it might seem, that repetition of making sure that you're putting your foot in the right spot at the right frequency every stinking time is big.
Yeah.
And so, you didn't mean to name drop, but I'm just saying that we're talking about the perfection these people are chasing when they're trying to be as close to perfect as they possibly can when they're taking that car. By the way, I was at the Music City race, the culmination of the I don't know what they call the series, but he won, and I mean I was in the pits with these guys, and I'm kind of rubbing shoulders with these guys, and I'm looking at these. They're just testing that car over and over and over and over again the day before, right? And
Oh yeah.
it's precision, and they realize there's no room for fluff. There's no room for attitude. And by the way, I gave him a copy of my flow book. I said, you crash, and then you got to recover from that mentally and go back in the car and do it
Yeah.
again, right? And I don't care what you say, you're thinking about that shit, right? Especially when you got somebody's car
Oh,
on top of your
yeah,
head, you know.
man. I'll tell you what. I used to when I lived in New York before being back in Texas. I used to race on a crit team here, and I remember a couple times crashing during crit races. And
It's the worst.
anytime you get back on a bike for a little while, you're just not as aggressive because you're trying to get yourself to that point of being able to push that limit because it's in your head because it's just always going through and you're like I got to get back here quick, otherwise what am I going to do on race day?
I've done some criterium racing myself back in the day, and
Man,
you
yeah,
realize
and it's
back then there was no helmets, right? There was no hard shell helmets. Okay, and
oh yeah, and now the road bikes are these guys are running like 30C tires, and back when I was doing this, it was on like 23C. And God, I mean, it really makes you think that the old school guys running like 19s,
dude, we
21s,
were
like these
still in toe
little
cages.
tires.
We were in toe cages. We didn't have the pedals with the clip-ons, and so when we take that turn, because we do like tight courses, you take that turn, and the guys in front of you are throwing sparks when their pedals are catching the concrete, right?
Yeah.
And then when somebody goes down, it's like an explosion in a coat hanger factory. There's just nothing but ass and elbows flying everywhere. I was the
Oh
guy
yeah.
that
It's
always backed off. I never was going to win one of those. I was scared to death, man. And when I would
it's
race some of these guys, and they showed up with a helmet on, I'm like, oh shit, now it's real. Yeah.
yeah.
So
Now, I mean, hell, now my triathlon bike is 30C front and rear. And just the confidence when you feel that much more rubber on the road going into even turns, and you're not trying to like crush turns on a TT bike, but when you're on these bikes now and the tires are so big compared to what we used to ride, it's a whole different world.
Yeah, I have not
And I
experienced
remember
that yet.
just it's nuts, man. I remember riding these skinny little tires. You look down and it's like this big. And you're just like, how am I going into turns this fast? Makes no sense.
So, anywho, um, this book, when it comes out, is going to be incredible. And I say that not egotistically, but I'm just excited about it because it's teaching me things I didn't know yesterday. And every day
Yeah.
is another one of those revelations. And my focus has been to cause it to be a reference. So I don't want it to be like one and done. You read it, okay, I read his book. It's going to be large. It's going to be like a coffee table book. It's going to only come in hardcover, and
Oh,
it's good.
cool.
Yeah, and it's going to have. My goal is 500 pages. I think I told you. This is what it's going to look like. So it says one thing: run. Period. There's no templates. There's no training plans. It's just everything you need to know about running. Even the things you didn't even know you needed to know, you're going to be able to find there. And so it should be a function of like one day you think of something that you want an answer to it, you should be able to find it in this book. That's my goal. And so I went through, by the way, and one of the things that was really interesting about this journey so far is I start out by bringing in all the legendary coaches in history. And there's a little backstory on who they were, their philosophy and training, and how that might have had any relationship with the concept of flowing, right?
Oh, that's
And
cool.
and so I've taken all these guys, and I've gone through Tudor Bompa, I've gone through Medvedev, I've gone all these guys back in the day that were before the wall came down, USSR, these
Yeah.
communist revolutionary coaches back in the day, all the way back to Franz Stempfel. Who's that, right? Franz was like famous in 1937, and he was like one of the architects of the concept of interval training. So I'm taking all these pearls of information from the greatest coaches that ever existed up until now.
Is he the one he was known for doing like a lot of short but super hard intervals? It's like when he would slow down, he really wasn't even going that
Well, there's a lot of guys that were tiptoeing into that, but it's really interesting when you look at what they were doing and how they were trying to organize that work, and then getting to the guys that's their whole function, like Bompa and Medvedev. Their whole thing was they were scientists. They're just trying to create
Yeah.
periodization tables that work, and all the various types of periodization tables that they were employing, and who did them and why they did them and what was the outcome for having done it. So I wanted to go there because the book is not about me. The book is about everything you should know. I mean, if you understood
That's
where it
cool.
came from, then you can go into it, right? And then I did a whole thing on the anatomy of a running shoe, right? So basically, dissect a running shoe, and then went into
Okay.
the different properties of a running shoe, and then start to separate fact from fallacy in respect to what it could or could not do for you. Go ahead. I see you're dying to
Okay.
know.
So I had this question for you, and it's one of the questions I wanted to ask you. So I think most people and carbon shoes are cool. They're great. I love putting them on, getting a great run in. I'm like, man, I'm fast, I'm flowing. But think I think athletes should go through just like in their training, blocks of training with basically an old school style shoe. where it's not high efficient. Because I mean, look at guys like Mark Allen. They were running in what by today's standards would be a minimalist shoe. And they were not running marathons that much slower compared to what guys are creeping in on now at the end of an Ironman.
Well, you know that Mark Allen participated in my race, as did Dave Scott, as did the
Yeah,
Molina,
I the one down in
all.
San Diego.
So I knew these guys, right? And I was back there in the day too. And you're looking at early '80s, but a lot of these guys were making their claim to fame in the late '70s, right? And so the shoe industry was just starting to screw around with elevated heels, things like this. Um, but they were still doing a lot of volume. I mean, these guys are putting in a lot of work. I used to tease them.
Yeah.
I'd call so and so and say, "Hey, you coming to my race?" No, I don't think so. Well, so and so's coming. Boy, he's crushing it. He's out in the desert doing 400 miles a week on his bike, and just what he's doing, what, and so then they started like playing off each other, and you could cut the air with a knife when you got all these guys into the
Oh yeah.
the transition area that morning, because I started a fire, man. I started shit between all these guys. But so the shoe thing now, and again, I wrote a piece in there that's also going to be controversial because it's going to be about what I think. But I know people in the industry, the scientific industry, where it's related to shoes. Um, Dr. Irene Davis, she heads up the Spalding Research Center at Harvard University on running. I've known her. I've met her. I've done podcasts with her. Her opinion about shoes. Lieberman, Cucuzella. I could go through a laundry list of people that I've met that have been kind of looking at this thing. And a lot of it was right after the Born to Run thing, right? Where everybody's, oh my God, we're going to be like a Tar Mahar Indian, got to get 5-finger shoes. And, everybody can start getting hurt, right? Because they didn't change the way
Yeah,
they
but I
run.
mean, when was the last time people went barefoot every single day? That when you're not a kid, you've been wearing shoes for how long? You can't just go, oh, I can do 10 miles and then be like, oh, I'm going to do it barefoot.
Well, what's interesting is I talked about going out and doing clinics. At every one of those clinics, I would find natural surface for people to run on, make them all take their shoes and socks off and run barefoot. And so we're doing like
Yeah.
intervals. And these are people that came in, they were complaining about a particular injury, like their knee, the IT band, their knee, the this, that, whatever. And they were able to do this unscathed. Nobody came away from it going, oh, shit, you shouldn't have made me do that because I hurt. I did 10 years of that, okay? And I never saw anybody come away injured. As a matter of fact, when I find somebody that has been complaining about reoccurring injuries, especially plantar fasciitis, which is a nightmare, everybody that gets that, they own it for a year, right? The solution was get your shoes off, get on some AstroTurf someplace, and just start doing some running in. Because what you're doing is you're starting to retrain the afferent feedback that's coming from your foot and the ground. Your central nervous system is identifying what muscles to contract, what to relax, what the frequency of the vibrations between you and the ground are, and you start to reset. And then all of a sudden you're cool again.
It's funny because it's like if you take somebody who's like an aggressive hill striker and you take their shoes off and you're like, I just want you to run 100 meters.
They're not
They
going to land on
can't
their heel.
run the same. And just naturally, like the instinctive response to it is next thing you know, they're on the ball of their foot.
Right.
They're under them because you
Well,
just can't smack dead heel into the ground out in front of you without that protective cushion.
so the problem is that when they put their shoes back on, so let's just say I sold you hard on, being, neutral, getting rid of all that cushion between you and the ground. And so now you no longer have that elevated heel. Your heel cord was accustomed to being a little shorter than now you're asking it to be. So now you're putting an imposed stress on a cord that is not accustomed to having it. And through repetition, you start beating it up. or just anything to do with the kinetic chain that is outside the norm, it starts to face resistance when you start increasing the volume or the intensity. So it always comes back with somebody having some niggle that was, you talk about the devil you know versus the devil you don't. They come to me for one problem, and then I hand them a new problem because I'm trying to talk them into making a transition. So it's a fine line that you have to tread when you're trying to identify how to correct the flaws. Because at the end of the
Yeah.
day, the argument's correct, and physics does dictate the case. There's a way to put your foot on the ground where it should be relative to your center of mass, how much force production you're going to earn off of that movement pattern versus what you were doing before. And it's better, but you have to learn it and you have to earn it. You can't just decide
Yeah.
one day, to get rid of the old shoe. I stopped telling people to change their shoes.
Yeah.
I tell them once they earn the correct movement patterns, then carefully start to migrate towards the more neutral contact point where their foot is now doing what it's supposed to do, and
Yeah.
so on and so forth. So getting back to my 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 smash on these poor guys in High Rocks is I see it. And by the way, what else I see is I see these high stack height shoes, and these guys are trying to do lunges. They're trying to do a farmer carry and all these exercises that require stabilization when they make their foot contact. And their foot's going, wah, 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 wah,
Yeah.
and they're losing it. And so that cushion is starting by the way, even when they're running, it's taking away energy return that should be there. You're you're losing ground force reaction because of that cushion. It's not increasing your ability to push off the ground. And going to the thing that you'll read it in the book, and this is not me talking, this is just research that I've conducted. And these are people that are far more intelligent than I'll ever be. And they've done the research, right? And they're showing you what the research says. The carbon plate into that foam wedge will work for you, assuming that your mechanics are on point.
Yeah.
If you don't run well, you'll not earn any of the value of that carbon plate. So
Exactly.
that almost eliminates 70% of the people that are hoping that shoe is going to make them faster.
Well, and I will also state this, and maybe I'm wrong. I could be, but I have a lot of people that I've had to get out of only running in carbon shoes. Now that they're available, that's all they run in.
Well, they should.
And I'm like, don't only do all your runs in that shoe because your foot for that day, it's in that carbon plate, and you're going to feel that return if you hardly ever use it because it's something extra. It's giving you extra, but it doesn't. If you use it all the time, it's turning off muscles.
Well, so here's my argument. When you
So
start
I
changing,
more efficient shoe that
yeah,
makes you
well,
work.
here's the opinion. I get where you're going with this. Here's where I'm
Yeah,
coming from.
maybe my words are not
No,
correct,
I
but
I
you
totally
get what I'm
get where
saying.
you're going with this, and I understand your argument.
Yeah,
So when you shift away from one style of shoe to another style of shoe, the first thing that happens is the confusion that occurs between the relationship with ground contact and your central nervous system. Because
yeah,
it's like every time you hit the ground, it's like a tuning fork. And there's vibration that's occurring that's sending a signal up and sending a signal down, right? And then
yeah,
when you go out of that format that you're accustomed to, and the term is that's used, by the way, a friend of mine, Dr. Emily Splikel, I think she's in Arizona now, podiatrist. I learned this from her. She goes, you should almost put your bare foot on a surface you intend to be running on and to pre-activate your central nervous system's response to that surface. And so then you become reactive when you're relying on what the shoe's telling you and your brain not identifying the signal quite as readily as it was in the other shoe. So now you got confusion. So a good example of this is guys running road and decide to start all of a sudden running trail or vice versa. They want to
Yeah.
argue that they run on trail, it doesn't hurt them. They run on road, it hurts them. When they run on road, it's because they're not pre-active. Their brain and the body is not responding to that surface as readily as it had on the other surface. So it doesn't make a difference whether you went from road to trail or trail to road. It's the confusion that's created. So the same thing applies to shoes. I tell people, and and I'm not going to go on my rant about a particular shoe manufacturer because I don't. But I tell people, whatever format of shoe that you're comfortable with, that's working for you. So broad toe box, whatever the stack height is, heel elevation, whatever. If you're going to go to trail, have that shoe be exactly the same. In other words, the
Yeah.
only difference really would be one's got a different kind of tread versus the other. But the format isn't going to cause, you're not throwing a curve at your brain. And so if you go away from accustomed to being into that shank and no longer having that shank, you're changing the deformity of that material and your foot has to respond to it. Now, you might argue that
Yeah.
that will make you stronger. I would argue that that imposes stress that your body probably didn't need. So,
Well,
it's
my argument was the carbon plate itself, right? Because it's so stiff that after a while, your foot, your calf, your tip, like certain muscles get accustomed to not having to work as hard because of what the shoe is supposed to do. Does that make sense?
well, I don't know that it's accurate. I could see your argument. I mean, I don't. First of all, I'm not terribly sure that that the carbon is doing anything for you other than giving you that little bounce. That's not relieving some of your work. It's just introducing a little bit more push off. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm telling you, I've in my book, I've got the whole
It's
chapter
supposed
on
to
this.
create like an extra shock, like with that carbon
It's a
plate. It's supposed to
spring.
up you
It's
off.
basically a pogo stick. It's
Yeah.
like you're coming off that
Right. That's
spring.
what I meant. How to
Now,
shock.
if you come at it incorrectly, it won't work. If you heel strike with that thing in there, if anything, it's going to work against you. And I'm
Yeah.
just telling you that I have people will come to see me, swear to me they're not a heel striker. Put them on the treadmill, shoot the video, show them the video. They go, "Fuck." They go, I didn't know. Because their perception was that they were on their forefoot. Their perception was
Yeah.
completely skewed. So you can sell all day long that you're doing the right thing, and that's why you earn the right to have that shoe. I'd say you might want to take a closer look to see whether you need to correct the way you're running so that you can earn the ability to get that extra little bounce that's going to provide you, or get out of it altogether
Yeah.
and do something a little bit closer to the ground. And I mean, by
Oh
the
yeah.
way,
I
just the final comment about this to me is you're better closer to the ground. You would be, if you were trained well enough, strong enough, on a concrete floor, you'd be better to race barefoot.
get the right tread on there so you can got that sled push. You're good to
Well, I'm
go.
just saying that if you, I'm not us us folk in the United States. We were born with pink feet, and our parents put those
Yeah.
Nikes with little lights in there. As soon as we were cool enough to put a shoe on, they started screwing us up, right? And do you know who Zola Budd is?
No, it sounds familiar.
Zola Budd was an Olympian. She was from South Africa, and she ran for Great Britain in the Olympics. And her distance was 5K, shorter distance, middle distance runner. And she was a medaler. She was an amazing athlete. I met her, had a conversation with her about growing up in South Africa. She told me that when she grew up in South Africa, just the community at large, the pediatricians would tell the parents, don't put shoes on your kids till he's like 12 or 13 years old because he'll be stronger down the road. And so it was actually socially acceptable to go into stores, go into a theater, or whatever, barefoot. Everybody was walking around barefoot because they
That's awesome.
identified. And she goes, we didn't have hip issues, we didn't have knee issues, we didn't have plantar fasciitis, we had none of that stuff. It just didn't exist in our society because we all
Yeah.
trained our feet. She ran on the track, a tartan track. She'd put a piece of duct tape on the ball of her foot. That's it, and would kill it, right? And now again, I'm not saying that people should run barefoot. I'm just saying that there's a point in time where if you trained on the appropriate surface to really educate your relearn what you're born to do,
Yeah.
you could be in a better
Yeah.
place.
Yeah. I mean, running's a learned, uh, it's a learn. What's the word I'm looking for? It's a learned skill.
Absolutely,
And,
absolutely.
and I try to, people go, what do you mean? And I'm like, when was the last time you ran? You know, when they come to me, they're like, hey, I've just been weightlifting. I want to start getting into running. I'd like to do a mile nonstop and then a 5K. I'm like, okay, well, we got to learn how to run. They're like, I know how to run. And I'm like, no, you know how to run for your life if Mike Myers was coming at you. There's a difference. And I'm like, because if I took you and you had surgery on your back or something happened and you were in a wheelchair for 6 months or a year, you would have to learn how to walk again.
Well,
Running's the
thus
same way. It's a
why I'm
learned
writing a
skill.
500-page book. And it's not like I'm protesting. It's not like I'm trying to tell people they were wrong and I'm right. It's not, none of that's going on in here. I'm just sharing what's out there. I'm sharing what people are saying, what people smarter
It's
than
a
me
book
are
of
saying.
knowledge.
Right. And then, so the same thing with the energy systems, right? I track back heart rate training. When do you think the first time people started talking about heart rate training was?
Man, I don't know. Probably 100 plus years ago.
No, no. I mean, well, you're close. 1993, or excuse me, 1937 is what it was. 1937 was one of the
1937.
first guys that started look. And you know what's really funny? They're doing intervals, and the window of the interval was 180 to 120. The 120 was
Okay.
recovery, 180 was the top end, and they were doing it by palpitating. You know, just run, what's your heart rate, recover, what's your heart rate, and doing intervals like that, right? And by the way, in this
Wow.
book, when I go into heart rate training, I went back through and showed you everybody chronologically that introduced some study or research or product to create heart rate training. And yeah, so it's like that. And then of
Impressive.
course,
I know in the 80s it looked like a box on your chest.
right. Well, so Sally Edwards was probably the most notable person in the world of heart rate training. She was the one that came up with the 5 zones. Her little pamphlet went into all of Polar's little devices, and I think I own one of the first heart rate monitors in 1983. Well, by the way, that's the year that they introduced commercially available heart rate monitors, 1983. Hadn't been that long ago.
No,
But
well, that's what I said. And it wasn't this little straps that we have today. It was like
it was
it
a
was
little
a like
bulkier.
a box.
It was
Yeah.
a little bulkier. Well, there was what they call those things, harnesses or something like that, but they use them for medical practice. I know you know this guy. You know who Maffetone is, right?
Yeah.
Phil Maffetone.
Yeah.
By the
Yeah.
way, I
Yeah.
did a clinic with Phil
Yeah. He was
Maffetone.
the first one that got Mark Allen to
So he said,
reset his heart.
yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he said, Mark Allen's mother could have told him if he slowed down, he'd probably do better. And so I did a clinic. It was actually a presentation for personal trainers at the Las Vegas Athletic Club with Phil Maffetone in,
That's cool.
I think it was 2000. It was 25 years ago, right? Something like that, right? And so
Oh,
by the way, I brought my metabolic cart. And so he started out with this whole rant about being in, minimal shoes and blah, blah, blah. And, his prediction of heart rate or whatever. And I sat there and I was like falling asleep, right? And then finally it was my turn, right? And I said, okay, Phil. So I started putting people on a cart and looking at their threshold. And he's standing next to me. I said, look at that. You're pretty close on this one. Whoops, missed that one. Whoops, pretty good on this one. Whoops, missed it. I went through and showed him, but about 60% of the time, this 180 minus your age thing was pretty accurate for coming up with the threshold, right? And I think it was probably, I don't know, 10 years later, I did a podcast with him. I called him up, did a podcast, and I apologized. I said, you came up with this concept of these little, fluffy little flat shoes, saying how it was the thing to do and whatever. And I thought you're out of your freaking mind. And I said, I just want to, I talked about you like a dog for 10 years. I said, I just want to apologize.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But
Man, every time I talk to you, man, you have all these stories that I could just sit and listen to.
yeah, it was
Like, hold
ridiculous.
on, let me get a coffee and I'm just going to sit down and listen.
Well, let me just share this with you. This book, and I've never been this excited about something I wrote. And I really want it to work, So you could write anything you want to, and it could, it's like when a tree falls in the forest, right? Who hears it, right? You
Yeah.
marketing it is critical. I think that once it gets out there and people see this, it's going to be the thing you want to buy your friend for a gift. It's going to be like, hey, I know, Johnny just loves to run and he'll dig the shit out of this. I'm going to send it to him for Christmas. So I'd love to have it available for Christmas, but we'll see. I got to get past my wife first.
Well, hey, if not, Valentine would be a great one because I'll be like, I just want the new Diaz book. That'd be great.
I'm serious.
As soon as that one's available, dude. You know me, I'm gonna get it. Because I have the ebooks of the Dark Side, Marathon, and Flow.
Well, I can tell you that we decided collectively that it's not going to be available in a digital download. That just kind of that
Okay,
just
that's fine. I
it
love a good
yeah.
hard copy.
So I'm just saying we just felt like it's gonna take some of the vibe away from it because you need to pull that
Yeah.
open. And so we started talking about um, directing people to particular chapters in the introduction, or whatever. And I said, no, that's the table of contents. If you've got a problem, go to the table of contents, look for that chapter. It's going to be there. The whole thing
I
on
love this
injury.
because it's like a history and almost like this wonderful encyclopedia of knowledge about running and something that you can constantly reference. And like before we get off, one thing that I still do, and I've told you this before, even for my own workouts, I will still go watch just to remind myself, even though I know it, your short little run form YouTube video where the guy just does this. And for years now, that's how I start every single run. I do a dynamic warm up and then I
I
start
love
real
that.
slow. And
You
then I
know,
just slowly pick up the pace over the first like 10 to 15 minutes and just get myself up to stride. And you see me going down the street and I'm like a little old person, like shuffling. I'm just
yeah.
doing
Well,
this down the block.
that little video was ridiculous. It's still ridiculous. I think I every now and then I'll look at it just to see the count. I think we're getting close to 1.5 million downloads.
It's
Ridiculous.
perfect. It
It's
doesn't need
ridiculous.
anything
And
else.
and under these circumstances these days, even on social media, somebody puts up a video, it looks like Coppola did the thing, right? It's the presentation, the quality of the video, and everything is so on point. And this beat down
Yeah.
video, audio's weak, and just it's just two guys in a garage doing a
It's
video.
it's just because it's the visual of what needs to be done in a simple manner. That's it.
Holy
And
cow!
it's relatable because people love having things that are hard to grasp and making it as simple as possible.
So you're now in New York, and you're still coaching, right? So are you doing all your coaching virtually, or are
Oh
you
yeah.
actually? So you're not in
No,
person
now
yet.
that I'm here in New York, yeah, now that I'm here in New York, this is where I started. So I'm back into just a few spots where I'm doing one to one in person, but the majority of my stuff is still all online.
All right. Well, look, thank you so much. And when it hits the market, tell 20 of your friends. That's all I can hope for.
Oh, dude, I'm gonna buy a copy and I'll share it for sure. Because I love getting your books, and I tell anybody that doesn't understand what I'm trying to talk about, I'm like, here, buy these books, read them, come back to me, and they're like, okay, I get it.
All right, man. Best of luck to you. Cheers.
All right, Rich, I'll talk to you later, buddy.
See ya.